SATs are coming up and you've just started studying. Well, it turns out you're not alone. Almost 70% of you guys said that you would not be ready at all for the SAT if you had to take it. Well, the SAT tests you on 20 different types of problems. But after looking at it, I found that there are 5 main things that you need to know how to do to succeed in the math SAT. And trust me, if you just quickly review how to do these the day before the test, it could save you hundreds of points. So let's get started. All right, the first thing that you need to know how to do for the math SAT is just basic solving for x. So for example, if you were to get this equation and I told you you needed to solve for x, would you be able to do it? Well, the goal of any solving for x problem is to get x by itself, right? So we need to get this plus 2 out of the way so that x is by itself. And you should be able to recognize that this is a plus, so we need to do the opposite of adding, which is subtracting. So if we subtracted 2 from both sides, then these cancel out, and we'll have x on this side. And on the other side, we'll have 5 minus 2, which is 3. So x is equal to 3. So essentially, you should just be able to solve for x in like one-step equations and also two-step equations like this one. If I was to give you this problem on the SAT, then you should be able to ask yourself, which one should I get rid of first, the 2 or the 3? And ideally, you'd be able to say, oh, well, you see this 2 here, this 2 is more attached to the x, and if we divided it out, we'd have fractions everywhere, and we don't want that. So we should get rid of the 3 first by subtracting 3. This would give you 2x equals 6, and then you just have a one-step equation that you'd solve like normal. And finally, you should be able to solve problems with the distributive property. Whenever you have a number in front of these parentheses here, that should immediately say in your head, this is the distributive property, which means you have to multiply the 4 to both parts of the equation. So we have 4 times x, which is 4x, and then 4 times 2, which is 8, but we do have the negative sign, and the negative sign is to carry over. So we would have 4x minus 8 equals 12, and then you would just solve it like normal. If you need to brush up on solving for x, then I do have a video on it that you can watch in the link in the description. All right, the second thing that you're going to need to know for the SAT is a basic idea of how graphs work. For example, if I was to give you this line, could you tell me what the equation of this line is? Well, remember that the form for the equation of a straight line is always y equals mx plus b. And m stands for slope, and b stands for y-intercept. So would you be able to tell me what the slope and y-intercept are of this line? Well, first of all, the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. The y-axis is this vertical line here. And it looks like it does it right here. This is where it crosses, right? So to get to this point, we're going to have to start in the middle and go up. 1, 2, 3. In this case, that means our y-intercept is 3. And now how do we read the slope of this graph? Well, first we need to pick any point here. This one is nice and even in between these lines. It's going to have nice whole numbers, no fractions, so I'll pick this one. Now we have to figure out how much we rise and run because slope is rise over run. So in this case, if we rise 2 and run 1, we will be back on the graph again. So in this case, that means we have to rise 2 and run 1, so 2 over 1, and 2 divided by 1 is 2. So that means our slope is 2 and our y-intercept is 3. So to write this as an equation, all we have to do is replace m and b with these numbers. So y is equal to 2x plus 3. And that would be the equation of this line. So yeah, just make sure you've got this down before you take the SAT, and if you need more practice with it, then I have a video in the description. All right, the third thing that you're going to need to know for the SAT is just some basic geometry facts. So like, for example, if I was to show you this triangle, would you be able to tell me how many degrees this angle is right here? Well, there's a geometry rule that triangles always add up to 180 degrees. So if you wanted to find out how much this angle is, all you would need to do is subtract these two angles from 180, and then whatever's left is this angle. So if we do 180 minus 50 minus 70, that's these two angles. That would be 180 minus 50 is 130, and then minus 70 is 60. So this angle is 60 degrees. And it would probably also be wise to know the Pythagorean theorem and how to use it. So see if you can figure out what this missing side is on this right triangle. So remember, whenever you have a right triangle, that is, you have a 90-degree angle, this little square thing in a triangle, then you can figure out one of the missing sides by using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a and b are interchangeable. You can use a and b whenever. So this one can be a and this one can be b, or you can flip them, whatever. But c is always the longest side. It's always this diagonal side across from the square angle here. And this is called the hypotenuse. So let's go ahead and plug in what we know to figure out what c is. So we know that a is 3 and b is 4. So now let's go ahead and simplify what we have here. So 3 squared is 9, and 4 squared is 16. And 9 plus 16 is 25. So now because we need to get c by itself, c is being squared here. So the opposite of squaring is square rooting. So we'll square root both sides. In this case, the square root and the squared cancel out, and we just have c. And the square root of 25 is, well, plus or minus 5, but in this case, we're only dealing with positive numbers because it's only positive length of sides. So in this case, c is going to be 5. So the length of this side is 5. And just as a side note, using formulas like this and being able to plug in numbers and figure out a variable is really good too. But you actually don't have to memorize formulas for the SAT. The SAT will give you a list of all the formulas that you'll need. All right, now here's a terribly drawn circle, and there are only a couple things you're going to need to know about circles, because remember, the area of a circle, things like that, they'll already give those to you on the formula sheet. But you should know that a circle in total all around is 360 degrees. So if you have half of a circle, then that would be 180 degrees, and a quarter of a circle would be 90 degrees. And you should also know the difference between radius and diameter. So if I told you that all the way across the circle is 2 inches, but just from the middle to the end of the circle is 1 inch, which one is the radius and which one is the diameter? Well, the line from the middle to the end of the circle, that's the radius. And this one all the way across is the diameter. And also, you might need to find the circumference of a circle. The formula for the circumference is pi times the diameter. So basically, even though it gives you these kinds of formulas, you should still at least know what they are, because the circumference formula isn't very helpful if you don't even know what circumference means, right? So circumference just means, like, it's like the perimeter of the circle. It's all the way around, the length of the circle. So in this case, if we needed to find the circumference of the circle, the diameter is 2, so it's going to be pi times 2. And 3.14 times 2, you can just put that in your calculator. You'll get 6.28. And yes, you are allowed to use a calculator on the SAT. All right, the fourth thing that you're going to have to know for the SAT is just some basic statistics and probability. You're like, that is not basic. Well, what is basic about statistics and probability? Well, lucky for you, this topic is actually not that often on the SAT. Usually the SAT only has like 1 or 2 probability questions. But it is something that's good to know, especially because there will be some tables on the SAT that might tie in with some of the other types of problems you'll have to do. So it's good to know how to use them. So like, for example, you should know what mean, median, and mode are. And if just as a review, the mean is the same thing as the average. So to find the average of these numbers, you would just add them all up and then divide by how many numbers there are. So we would have 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6. And then you would divide by how many numbers there are. In this case, there are 5 numbers. So 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, that's 20. And you can put that in your calculator as well. And then divide it by 5. And 20 divided by 5 is 4. Median just means the middle number. So in this case, the middle number, when you put them from least to greatest, so if they're not from least to greatest, you'll have to do that. And the one in the middle is 4. So median is 4. And mode just means the most common number. But all of these numbers are the most common. They're all only used once, so there's actually no mode in this case. But let's say that this had another 6, then in this case, the mode would be 6. You may get 1 or 2 probability problems on the SAT, but they're actually not that bad. Literally, the extent of probability problems is just like flipping a coin or rolling one die. So would you be able to tell me in fraction form, what are the chances of flipping heads on a coin? Well, you should be able to tell yourself that, well, a coin has 2 sides. It has a head side and a tail side, and heads is only on one of those sides. So it's on one side out of the 2 possible sides. So the chances of getting heads is 1/2. And tails is the same thing. There's only one tail side out of 2 sides on the coin, so 1/2. Now, what about for dice? If you had to roll a die and I said it's a 6-sided die and you need to roll a 5, what are the chances of rolling a 5? Well, there's only one side with a 5 on it, so that would be 1 over, and then there are 6 possible sides, so 6. So the chances of rolling a 5 are 1 out of 6. And finally, you should just have a basic idea of how to read tables. So like, if I was to ask you, what is the most common favorite color in this group? Well, blue, because 4 people said it. That's the most people. That's it. That's all you're going to need. Now, the final thing that you're going to need to know how to do for the SAT, and it's probably the most important and the most scary to a lot of students. Yeah, it's word problems. Now, word problems scare a lot of students, but it really doesn't have to. And the reason for that is you solve word problems every day of your life. So when you go to the store, let's say you're going to a clothing store and you want to buy some t-shirts, and t-shirts cost $10, but you want to buy 4 t-shirts. Well, if you're trying to decide if you can afford it, you would just say, well, I mean, there are 10 t-shirts and I want to buy 4 of them. You could probably say that they cost $40. I mean, minus the sales tax, and it depends on what state you live in. And we won't talk about sales tax here. But assuming that tax doesn't exist, 4 shirts for $10 each, that's $40. That makes sense to you. You go to the store and you know that you're not going to be spending a fortune. The hard part that trips students up is how to write this as an equation. So how did you figure out that 4 t-shirts cost $40? Well, you probably multiplied 10 times 4 in your head. So if you wanted to write a general equation for how much t-shirts cost, then all you have to do is say, well, I am multiplying the cost, $10, by however many I'm buying. So that would be 10 times, and then we'll do T for t-shirts. And then you would say equals whatever cost is. We'll just say C, right? And now suddenly you have a math equation that tells you the price for t-shirts. So whenever you buy t-shirts, you would plug in the number that you want to buy, and out you get the cost of the t-shirts. Now this applies for even more complicated problems like this. This can be a little harder to put as an equation, but just take it one step at a time and think about it logically like you would if you were at a clothing store. Now it can also help, and I know this is probably the cheesiest thing ever that they tell you to do in elementary school, but it can help, and that is underlining important phrases with numbers in them. Now most people are taking the digital SAT now, and there might not be a highlight feature or underline feature, but just do it in your head or do it on scratch paper or something. So here I'm seeing it charges $100, so I'm going to underline $100. And I'm also seeing 5 cents per view. And then we are finding the cost for 500 views. So how are we going to write this as an equation? Well, we'll do the same thing. We're going to have C, the total cost. We want to find the total cost. And it looks like they're always going to charge us $100. So don't be afraid to put numbers that you're not sure about. Just it charges $100. Let's just put 100 here. But it also says plus, and it was pretty nice of them, or nice of me who wrote the question, to put the word plus here. And now it says $0.05 or 5 cents per view. Now, whenever you see the word per, that usually means you're going to be multiplying, just like the last example. It's $10 per t-shirt. So we're going to put 0.05, but it's dependent on how many views we get. They charge 5 cents per view for every view. So if you just had to write the general equation for it, you didn't have to solve a specific amount of views, then you would just put V. V for views. But it wants us to find specifically for 500 views. So we will replace V with 500. And you could put this in your calculator, but it would be 5 cents times 500. That would be $25. And 100 plus 25 is 125. So it would cost you $125 for 500 ad views. And finally, you should just have a basic idea of how greater than and less than signs work. So in this case, we changed the problem a little bit. We now know that John has $200, and we need to know how many views he can afford. Well, you would write the equation the same way. And we do have a cost here. We can replace C with 200 because that is John's budget. But now we need to figure out what sign to put here. What should be bigger, the 200 or the 100 plus 0.05V? Well, we can just think about this logically. If we have $200, we want what we're buying to be less than $200. If it's more than $200, then we can't afford it. So we want this, how much it costs, to be less than $200. So in this case, the 200 is going to be bigger than what we're buying. And also, are we going to put a line underneath this sign? Because remember, if we put a line underneath, that means or equal to. Can our purchase be exactly $200? Yes, it can, because John has $200. So in this case, if we pay exactly $200, then it's fine. So we'll put a line underneath. So this would be our equation, and then you would just solve it like normal. Well, I hope this video gave you a basic guideline of what you can review before you go and take the test. And a lot of the topics I talked about in this video, I also have videos on already. So if you're stuck on something like word problems, for example, then you can watch this video right here, where I show you some basic inequality word problems that you can use to practice for the SAT. If you have any questions about the SAT coming up or any of the problems in this video, then go ahead and leave a comment and I'll be sure to answer your question. Thanks for watching.